Hey everyone, welcome to Ex-Fundie Diaries. My name is Ellie, my pronouns are she, they, and this video is part 2 about my AWANA experience. In part 1, I talked mostly about the fun parts of my AWANA experience and the things that were mostly positive for me. But in this part, I'm going to be talking mostly about the not so fun parts. When I think about my teenage years, I actually have some core memories that were pretty traumatic that happened at AWANA. So when I was in JV, the leaders had us put on a parent appreciation dinner where we wrote speeches to formally thank our parents for everything that they do for us. So we set up tables in the gym with nice tablecloths and we got all dressed up. And as usual, my dad didn't come to this event because he rarely came to events during my teenage years. But my mom came to it. So we had the dinner, we each gave our speeches, and then after that, the leader called all of the JV and varsity kids up to the front of the stage. And I can't remember exactly how many of us there were, but I think it was somewhere between 20 and 30 kids. And the leader told all of the parents that we had been working very hard to memorize and recite our verses and also to read and summarize books of the Bible. And then he turned to us and he said, if you have memorized X amount of verses, I can't remember how many it was, but I think it was a lot, please step forward. And everyone was able to step forward except for 2 or 3 kids. And I was one of those kids. And as soon as all the other kids stepped forward, the entire gym burst into applause. All the parents were clapping and cheering for the kids who had stepped forward because they had memorized all of these verses and were being publicly recognized. And I and the 1 or 2 other kids who didn't memorize all of those verses had to stand on the stage behind all of the kids who had stepped forward. It was so humiliating. I remember feeling my cheeks burn with shame. And it was one of those moments where I felt the cliche of wishing that the ground would open up so I could fall through. But I remember trying my best to smile and to look happy for the other kids. And I'm sure there was a part of me that was happy for them, that they were getting this recognition, but obviously I felt so embarrassed at being unable to join them. And I think there were a couple of reasons why I struggled so much to keep up with my other peers in the Bible memorization and the summarizing of the books of the Bible. My home life was so unstable and disorganized, so I just didn't have the consistency that was needed to do those massive amounts of reading and memorizing. And someone mentioned in the comments of part 1 that I seemed very terrified of losing my AWANA group. That is absolutely true. And one of the reasons why I was so afraid of that is because my parents were constantly trying to move out of the area, somewhere far away, at least 2 to 3 hours away from where my AWANA group was and where we were living at the time. We would go on regular house hunting trips that would sometimes take all weekend, all throughout my childhood. And I would like to eventually make a video only about that, but it's definitely too much to go into the details in this video. But I just wanted to mention that part of the instability in my family was this constant threat of moving always hanging over our head. It was one of the reasons why we weren't able to ever fully relax or put down roots in any of the churches or the other activities we were a part of. So not only was I trying to maintain a certain level of detachment, but my mom was actually telling me on a regular basis, don't get too attached because we're going to move. And we actually never ended up moving, but it was always a threat, and there was always drama around that, and we got really, really close to actually moving, maybe 3 or 4 times. But back to the moment of standing on the stage while all the parents were cheering for the kids who had gotten to step forward. When I think about that memory now, I just feel like it was so unnecessary to have all of us come onto the stage so that the leader could say, if you've memorized this amount of verses, step forward. Why could he have not organized it a different way and just had the kids who did memorize that amount come onto the stage? Whether, he called them up like a graduation, person to person, or if he said to the audience, if you've memorized this amount, please come onto the stage. There was no need for me and the other 1 or 2 kids who didn't get to step forward for us to be on the stage. It was just like an extra layer of shame. And I'm saying that it feels unnecessary to me, but honestly, maybe it was purposeful. I'll never know for sure, but maybe that was part of them trying to motivate us to do better the next year so that we wouldn't be humiliated. And I don't remember us ever having another parent appreciation dinner. For some reason, it just happened 1 year. So thankfully, this was not like a recurring experience. It was just this one time, but it really, really affected me. Another memory of feeling deeply ashamed at AWANA has to do with purity culture, surprise, surprise, and I wrote about it in my journal, but before I read that entry, here is the backstory. One of the boys in my AWANA group, I'm going to call him Corey, allegedly had a crush on me. I say allegedly because he never actually told me this directly, but everyone else was constantly telling me that he did. I really liked him as a friend, and my strategy for dealing with all of this was to try to just ignore it. When people would tease me and make annoying comments about him having a crush on me, I would try to just brush it off and keep moving. But in an environment like AWANA that is so steeped in purity culture and gender roles, it was very difficult to successfully ignore it. It really got blown way out of proportion to the point where people began assuming that we would eventually get married. That is so ridiculous. I was 14. But AWANA was constantly drilling purity culture into us through our book lessons, and my parents wouldn't even allow me to date. I was only allowed to court. And so this is a very common dynamic in homeschool circles that practice courtship. And not all of the kids at AWANA weren't allowed to date like me, but some of them weren't. And like I've said before, most of us were homeschooled, except for like maybe 1 or 2 families. And pretty much everybody was passing around I Kiss Dating Goodbye. So it was just different levels of purity culture, different extremes. And no one seemed to care about my feelings in the matter. It didn't matter that I only liked him as a friend. He liked me as more than a friend, apparently, and that's all that mattered because he was a boy. Even his mom and my mom would make jokes about being future in-laws. In a past video, I talked a little bit about how I refused to only be friends with girls, even though the parents were constantly trying to separate us by assigned gender. But what I didn't talk about was how this made me a target. I wasn't behaving the way that I was expected to. And so this caused the women and the older girls to be hyper-focused on me to make sure that I didn't cross any lines. One time, Corey bought me a gift, and he gave it to me in front of everyone at AWANA. It was a little yellow soccer ball, a size 3 for anyone who knows soccer ball sizes, and I loved it so much that I brought it with me to AWANA meetings. Sometimes we would have little scrimmages or keep away games in the parking lot, and so my little yellow soccer ball from Corey was one of the ones that we used. At the time, I just thought that this gift was a sweet gesture from a friend. In fact, I think it felt like a confirmation to me of my own personal beliefs about friendship transcending gender. And it wasn't like it was a necklace or a promise ring, so I didn't take it to be romantic. And I returned the gesture by buying Corey a Veggie Rock CD. I'm gonna try to give a quick explanation of what Veggie Rocks is. It's an album where Christian artists made covers of VeggieTales songs, and VeggieTales, probably most people who watch this channel will know what VeggieTales are. It was a Christian kids show about vegetables. I really can't explain much more than that, but Fundie Fridays has an excellent VeggieTales video that I will link down below. So if you haven't heard of it, definitely go check that out. Looking back on it now, I kind of wonder if Corey was trying to hint at something more than friendship by giving me this soccer ball. And maybe I accidentally reciprocated by getting him a gift. I mean, I guess from the perspective of Fundies, soccer balls and Veggie Rock CDs are basically a proposal, so I should have known that. Anyways, the yellow soccer ball makes an appearance in the journal entry I'm about to read. April 19th, 2005. On Sunday, I lost my little yellow ball Corey gave me. So we ran in to look for it that night, just me and him. We looked for a good 5 minutes and came out disappointed. I forgot to mention that I often carpooled with a few other families, and one of the parents that often drove was actually one of the leaders. So I was getting into that leader's car the night that we were looking for the soccer ball, and Corey wasn't in that carpool, but there were 4 other kids, all girls. When I came out and got into the car was when I got the beating. I didn't really get hit or anything, that was just my very dramatic way of describing what happened. Everyone made fun of me and teased me about Corey. The leader said, "The lights are on, the lights are off. Ooh, that's more comfortable." Everyone else followed her lead. She told Mom later that she was just using it as a teaching point to show how bad things can look. Mom told me that I need to be aware of how things look, but that the leader's behavior was inappropriate. So I want to give my mom like a little bit of credit here. Yes, she was reinforcing purity culture, and there are many times that she herself shamed me, but I at least appreciate that she told me that the leader shouldn't have been publicly shaming me in front of the other kids. So, thank you, Mom. I know it could have looked bad, but we were looking for a soccer ball, with a bunch of exclamation points. I was very, very, very hurt by the leader. If it had been just the girls, okay, I can survive teasing. While I was in the car, I did go from shock to embarrassment to sickness. But what if Corey hears? What then? Our relationship could be uncomfortable. Oh well, it's over. I learn from my mistakes and move on. At least I try to. And I pray very desperately that my soccer ball will be found. Mostly for Corey's sake. That was his hard-earned money, for me. I remember getting really upset in the car and trying really hard to defend myself. But the more I tried to explain, the more they would all tease me, and it was just a horrible ride home. They were just constantly laughing and going on and on about it. And I was so humiliated, especially because I totally bought into purity culture. I made it all the way to the altar without kissing anyone on the lips. And even though I hated courtship and wished that I was allowed to date, I followed my parents' rules all the way until I was 20 years old. So the fact that they were implying that me and Corey were making out in the dark up in the AWANA room felt like such an injustice. I was just like, I don't even like him that way. And I didn't do anything wrong. And of course, if we had been making out, that wouldn't have been wrong either. But it didn't matter that there was actually a whole bunch of space in between my body and his body as we went around in the AWANA room and looked for my soccer ball. I don't even remember what the thing with the lights was. I think we just had to turn on the light to look for it because it was at night and it was dark. And then we turned off the light when we left. But the most important thing was avoiding the appearance of evil. And at that, I had failed. And so this leader used me as an object lesson for the other kids in the car. That was really fucked up. And it really stuck with me. And it contributed to a lot of shame going forward and a lot of second guessing myself, especially in friendships with boys. I wish I could say that despite all of the outside interference and the purity culture and the gender roles, that Corey and I were able to save our friendship. But unfortunately, about a year and a half after the soccer ball incident, he started to bully me. And I have a journal entry to read about this and also a part of a letter that I wrote to my uncle about it. But before I read it, I just want to give a quick extra content warning for sexism. It does get rough at times. December 30th, 2006. I'd be turning 16 in a couple of months. Life seems like one huge storm, with giant choppy waves smacking me, trying to pull me down to drown in tears. Jesus, my Lord, is my lighthouse, my rock, my ever-present help. I am so undeserving, so unworthy. And yet, he loves me and drowns me in grace, which just triggers more guilty, painful tears. Yikes. So life was trying to drown me, but don't worry, Jesus is going to drown me himself with his grace. And that makes it okay. So much evangelical angst. Let me try to sum up the last couple of months for me. It all started with the loss of a very good friend, or so I thought. Corey. What a slap in the face. The dirty looks, the cutthroat humor, the deadly comments, the sexist comments, and I wrote sexist in all caps, that he so heavily poured out upon me. I later discovered all came from the fact that he is no longer romantically interested in me, but rather is now smitten with the up-and-coming Felicity, not her real name. I now realize with nauseating pain that our long, meaningful friendship was nothing but a one-sided crush. So I no longer call him. I no longer ask his advice, tease him, collaborate, or even chat with him at all if I can help it. And whenever he throws a comment at me, for instance, stupid girl, or a dumb girl is in my way, or, you know, you committed a crime just by being female, etc. I just smile and respond with something that makes him stop, cock his head, and regret his comment. Boys are so immature. Basically, my conclusion was boys will be boys. I just thought that it was an inevitable part of growing up. I didn't see it as an injustice or a problem that needed to be fixed. I honestly am really surprised that I even used the word sexism. I think his behavior just must have been so extreme that I was able to apply that label. Because there was subtle sexism around me all the time that I didn't even give a second thought to. But Corey was really spelling it out about how he felt. This next part is part of a letter that I wrote to my uncle. And the reason why I have it is because I used to photocopy letters that I had written before I sent them so that I could have a record of them. And that's a little embarrassing to admit, but I was just in the business of documenting everything. But I'm really glad that I have those copies now, because it helps give a fuller picture, especially because, you know, my uncle is not a Christian, and he's one of the ones that I was trying to evangelize. So I think it's interesting the way that I framed all of this, telling him, because I knew he didn't approve of our fundamentalist lifestyle and beliefs, and so I was often on guard with him. I didn't want him to think that I was weird, so I would try to, you know, use words like high school, even though I wasn't technically in high school. My friend Corey is the goofiest of goofballs I've ever known, and I would never have feelings for him, ever, in my wildest dreams. I do know that he used to have one heck of a crush on me, but I didn't really think it mattered. A few months ago, in the fall sometime, he started making really mean comments about me in public, just whenever he felt like it. It was very surprising, because he had no reason to. I tried to brush it off as his sarcastic humor, but he wasn't kidding. I've known him long enough to know when he's being sardonic and when he's mad. And I totally remember that. He would have such an angry look on his face and, quite honestly, hate in his eyes. Now, I'm not only embarrassed, but also annoyed. He'll say things like, "You can't sit here, Ellie. Everybody hates you." And at the play that we did, he said, "No one came to see you, Ellie. We all came to see Annie." But I also think he has shifted crushes, so he's trying to let her know he's not taken. I could have told her that. He used to be a really nice guy, though, and it's sad. Oh well. I'm going to try to talk to him about it. I have a feeling he'll say, "Get lost, you freak," and walk away. Ah, high school. Who needs it? So there I was trying to downplay my very valid feelings about what was happening. And it wasn't just that I was being bullied, that I was having sexism and hate directed towards me. It was that I lost a friend. I felt betrayed. It really felt like it came out of nowhere, and he never addressed it with me. He never explained why he was being so cruel, so publicly cruel, in front of our friends, in front of the AWANA leaders. The bullying lasted for about 6 months total. I can't remember if I ever actually confronted him about what he was doing, but for whatever reason, he eventually stopped. But our friendship never recovered from that. I was cordial, but I just kept my distance. One thing that I haven't mentioned is that Corey was actually the son of one of the leaders. And his dad saw him behave this way for the whole 6 months. And this leader did nothing. He ignored it, and he pretended that everything was fine. Someone asked in the comments of part 1 if I'm still in contact with any of the kids from AWANA and if we're still friends. And with the exception of one person, no, I am not in contact with them and we are not still friends. And actually, the way that that happened was very hurtful and traumatic for me. We did not just drift over time. When I was 19, they actually made a collective decision to stop being my friend. It's too long of a story to go into in this video, but I will say that purity culture had a lot to do with it.